I'd like to introduce our presenter, Lene Alves, President of Interview Like an Expert. She has graciously shared her valuable professional experience and insights with us in previous webinars on behalf of the library. And we're so glad that she's joined us again today. So with that, Lene, I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jordan. And let me get my screen up so that we can go through today's presentation that I have put together for all of you. I'm really excited to be back here with the Champaign Public Library. You know, I spent 4 years of my life in Champaign and Urbana as a student at the University of Illinois, so I certainly have a soft spot for all of you down there. So ILL-INI. So anyway, I wanted to say hi. I wanted to welcome you all to Ace That Interview. This is great, right? Interview skills is one of my very favorite things to talk about, as you might imagine, based on the name of my company, Interview Like an Expert. So let's get into it. But first, let me just whoops, hang on. What happened there? 1 second. Okay, hold on. Oh, sorry, I'm using the wrong, that's operator error, excuse me. Oh my gosh, I promise this will be the last one time I do that. Oh, that's so funny. I have to use a different function here to move the slides forward. Okay, so, oh my gosh, it's not working. That is crazy. 1 second, let's just try that again. My apologies. Jordan and I, of course, just did this a moment ago and it was just fine. So let me, actually, let me go back. Let me exit out of this really quick. Let me reopen this and save my changes here. And so bear with me, guys. So sorry about that, but sometimes technical issues are a great challenge for us all so that we can just think on our feet and act on our feet. Okay. We should be good now. My goodness. This is the first time that we've had these tech issues. All right, let's see if we can get this going at this point. Okay, there we are. Yay. All right. So here's a little bit about me. Not only did I attend the University of Illinois and study broadcast journalism there way back when, I now have kids in college, so that tells you about how long ago that was. I have professionally had over 20 years of experience recruiting, interviewing, and hiring. So I was a hiring manager for many years in my professional career. I worked at companies including the Chicago Tribune right out of college, as well as companies like apartments.com, livingsocial.com, and my last career role in corporate America was at Comcast. So lots of experience at very large companies. And in all of those companies, I was a hiring manager. I'm currently featured on CBS 2 here in the Chicago market as their career coach. And I've been contributing weekly segments for their Working for Chicago series for the last year. I can hardly believe it, but that series kicked off kind of at the early parts of lockdown, and we've been going weekly ever since, and it's been a wonderful privilege to work with them. So what I do professionally, I work as a career coach. I help clients with resume rewrites, with LinkedIn, their LinkedIn profiles, and leveraging LinkedIn, learning more about it. Job search strategies, how to job search most efficiently, and also including career transitions and interview coaching, which is what we are here to talk about this evening. So let's talk about how you can ace that interview. And I saw Jane, I believe, popped a note in the chat right at the beginning that said she's got a Zoom interview coming up. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit later in today's presentation. So let's talk about interview preparation. You know, one of the things, I know some of these things might sound obvious to some folks on the Zoom tonight, but I just want to make sure I go through all of the key elements of really doing a good job of being ready to really excel in an interview situation. So first and foremost, once you get an interview with a company, you want to go back and review the company website if you haven't already. You probably haven't spent a lot of time on it. You don't have an interview yet. So once you land that interview, it's time to go on their website and do a little exploration about some additional information, things that you may not know about them. If it's a big company and you're familiar with them, that's fine, but dig in a little bit and learn a little bit more about the company, kind of high points. What are they promoting on their website, et cetera. Also, I just want to advise everybody, when you're applying for roles, obviously some people are applying for a lot of different opportunities. When you see roles that are a really solid fit for your skills and experience, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but those are the roles that you really want to apply to. So sometimes quality of application is better than quantity. And by that, I just mean aligning your most recent skills and experience with the jobs that you're applying for will make a big difference in you landing an interview. So I want to address that for all of you as well. I'm going to really talk about preparing for the interview, but in order to get an interview, it is critically important that you have a job search strategy that's aligned with your most recent experience, because that is what employers are looking for. And just as a quick additional note, employers have the luxury these days of being able to find typically exactly the experience that they're looking for, because unfortunately, there are so many people who find themselves unemployed. So keep that in mind. Anyway, now you're applying for roles, let's say, that are a good fit for your skills and experience. For those that really pique your interest, I would suggest that you copy that job posting and paste it into a Word document, because some companies may not get back to you for a month or even more before they ask you to interview. And by that time, if you go back to that online link, that posting may be down and you may not be able to find it online. You might be able to, but just as a fail-safe, I would say certainly for those roles that really appear to be a great fit for you, I'd suggest that you copy, paste those, save them, and then that way, if you do land an interview with that company for that role, you can go back to that job posting. Why do you want to go back to it? Well, you want to see what are the skills and experience that they noted in the posting that they're looking for. Those are things that you'll want to remember and highlight and pay attention to, and ideally try to work in somehow in the interview, that you're engaging in. So we'll talk a little bit more about what you do and what type of interview, because there's a few different pieces of this interview process, right? But this is your initial preparation, learning about what the company's doing, what are some of their bigger initiatives, how might your role fit in with that? So I want you to think about that a little bit when you're preparing for an interview. The other thing you want to do is review and highlight key items that are on your resume that demonstrate why you're a good match for the role. So a moment ago, I said it's important for you to apply to roles where you are a good fit, where if they're asking for 10 or more years of experience, you have 10 or more years of experience. This means that if they're asking for 1 to 3 years and you have 10 years, you're not as good of a fit for them. They may not want to pay that much. They may view you as overqualified. They may just feel like we don't need somebody that skilled in this role. So again, understand that when they're asking for certain qualifications, you can certainly apply to jobs that are outside of those qualifications and skills and desired qualities, but you might not gain as much traction with those roles, okay? For those roles where you are a good fit, you really want to, again, look at that posting, look at your resume, and remember, what are those things that are in alignment? And you want to be able to talk to them during the interview. The other thing that you can do is even, again, depending on how you're interviewing, we are going to talk about Zoom in a little bit. So right now we're on Zoom, and if I were to, let me just grab a piece of paper off of my desk. If I were to be interviewing, right now I've got a piece of paper just I've got a laptop. I don't have a desktop set up here, but I've got a piece of paper that's laid right on my keyboard here with my open laptop. And I don't think that anyone would really be able to see that. Now, you don't want to have a ton of notes, so much that you can't navigate it, but you could create a little cheat sheet with some key points, whether it's some company things, company information that you want to remember and maybe work into the interview. Again, don't view this as something that you've got to use, that you've got to, work all of this information into your interview. It's really just there as a resource in case you forget, or in case you want to just really focus on those high points, those things that you want to make sure you get across in each interview that you are invited to do. So again, I can do that here, and I think it's fairly seamless putting it on my computer. But again, don't get yourself too crazy. You can also put Post-its on your screen when you've got like a computer like I have with my video camera built into it. So you could do that too, but that really doesn't give you a lot of opportunity or a lot of room for notes. So I tend to prefer writing a cheat sheet. I used to do this a lot, by the way, when I did a phone screen. So phone screens, they still exist. And we'll talk about these screening interviews. So for a phone screen, having a cheat sheet is a great thing. Definitely a great tool for you if doing a phone screen. And even you can get away with it during a Zoom meeting if you're skilled at being able to look at the camera and not look away and make it obvious that you're looking down. So the other thing for interview preparation that's so important is practicing interview questions out loud. This allows you to be even more prepared and comfortable. You know, I tell a lot of my clients and my groups that I run that practicing out loud is something that people don't often think to do. And what it does is it helps you with muscle memory, right? So you say these words over and over. So maybe you want to find some interview questions or think back on some interview questions you've been asked, maybe recently if you've been interviewing more, and write down your answer to that question and read it out loud. Listen to yourself, tighten it up, right? The other thing you want to do is when you're doing this out loud, you want to be talking more in sound bites, right? That's something I learned back in my broadcast journalism days when I was at U of I. And that's something absolutely that we practice and use on the newscasts that I do now, right? We only have a minute and a half to talk about a job tip. So I need to talk in sound bites that they can easily work into that segment. Interviewing is no different. Sometimes people feel like compelled to provide a lot of information to try and win somebody over, to show them how qualified they are. But sometimes that can be quite overwhelming for the interviewer, right? As the interviewer, I want you to remember, I can only take in so much information. So if I ask a simple question and you answer with a lot of stuff, it's kind of hard for me to take that all in. So I want you to keep that in mind too. So practice some of these questions, practice talking in clear sound bites and answering the question that's asked of you. That is so important. This will help you. So the practice is always going to help you feel much more calm, much more confident. And in the end, you'll be able to perform better. And I can tell you that this works. I just wanted to share with you some of the feedback, right, that I've gotten from clients who I've worked with. On the left, Michael, who I worked with doing one-on-one interview coaching, and he talks about the fact that the questions that we talked about asking at the end of the interview got the interviewer's attention and lots of good body language. Another client who I worked with who sent me this note on LinkedIn, right, saying I got the job, and a woman on the right here, Amy, who interviewed with AbbVie, a very large Chicago-based company, and had 7 job interviews to get through to get the job, but she got it. So this works, I promise you, and the people I've worked with get so much benefit out of this process. And so I know you all can take some of these tips tonight and use them for yourself in order to improve your interview skills. So let's talk about something I mentioned a few moments ago, and that's screening interviews. So I want to just walk you through the process of interviewing that you can expect with most corporate jobs, depending on the size of the company. So, you might be interviewing at a smaller company where maybe they aren't doing a screening interview. Maybe they go straight to a regular interview. But for the purpose of this evening, I just want to walk you through all of the things that can happen. So the screening interview is typically where the interview process starts with a lot of companies, right? And it's phone or now video. So you can expect a screening interview will last 20 to 30 minutes. So I want you to set your expectations appropriately. A lot of people don't intrinsically know that, although typically they will, the person you're interviewing with will tell you, hey, we're going to be, setting up a half-hour meeting. So pay attention to how much time they set with you. But typically you don't want to expect that meeting is going to go much more than 20 to 30 minutes. If it goes longer, that's great. That will be up to the interviewer, but this is pretty standard practice. So what's the purpose of the screening interview? Well, actually, before we get to that, I want to just also note that the person who conducts the screening interview typically can be more like a junior level recruiter who is an internal member of the company, or maybe a contract recruiter that they've hired, or it could be a member of the HR or talent acquisition teams, whatever title they use at their company. So in many cases, this is not the hiring manager, but again, this will all depend, and there's always exceptions to these rules. So I just want to let you know, you may not have a screening interview at a company. You may, and if you do, again, this is typical, but depending on the size of the company, you could be having a screening interview with a hiring manager as well. Now, what happens in a screening interview? Well, if you do well, you're going to be moved ahead into the next phase of individual or group interviews with the hiring manager or an HR manager or other team members, or a combination of those, right? I just referred to Amy's experience at AbbVie, where she interviewed 7 times to get her job. My last job at Comcast, I interviewed 10 times to get the job. So quantity of interviews has become more and more common. Again, certainly more common with larger companies. But I think also many companies, I'm hearing regularly of 3 and 4 interviews for people to land a job offer. So the questions in screening interviews do tend to be more general versus specific. So when I say that, what I mean is, these are kind of higher level questions. Typically, again, can be exceptions, but typically you're not getting into all the details of the job in this interview, or somebody isn't really digging in with you on your, in a detailed way about your qualifications. Again, it can happen. I had a client who interviewed with Cars.com probably a month or so ago, and she said, I think it was a recruiter dug right into the details with her. So there was no kind of screening interview that was kind of an easier general screening interview. It was right into the details, because he had some very specific questions for her about her experience, and wanted to try and assess if she was a good fit or not, right? So that's it. That can be the purpose of the screening interview. They screen to assess if your skill set and your work experience are a match for the role. And in the case of this client of mine, she has 2 pieces to her background, right? Public relations and investor relations. And the role that she had applied for was an investor relations job. And I think that she hadn't done that one quite as recently, but they really wanted to dig in on her experience in investor relations and determine, is this the person we want for this job? And they decided they weren't going to move her forward in the process. But a screening interview can be exactly for that. When I was a hiring manager, there were times when I would have an applicant apply for a job, and where I wasn't sure if I wanted to have them brought in for an interview, and I would personally do a screening interview. Sometimes for a variety of reasons. Like, for example, I could be screening somebody for their experience level, their compensation match. So in my case, when I was working at Comcast, we had a variety of sales roles that we hired for on my team. And I was a director and oversaw a team of about 40, well, depending on the year, 40 to 50 salespeople, and a number of managers as well. So sometimes we would post a job and it wasn't obvious the way we posted our jobs what the level of that sales role was. It wasn't obvious that something might be a more starter territory or sales role, or a more senior territory or sales role. So in some cases, when I saw certain applications come through, I would sometimes reach out to people and have a conversation, like kind of a pre-conversation, to see if this was even going to be a fit based on somebody's experience or their compensation expectations, so that, they didn't get disappointed and go down a path that wasn't really going to be one that met their needs, right? So that can be something that people do. And I know sometimes as candidates, we can get like a little bit bristled about the fact that people want to ask about compensation, but I can tell you that sometimes people are actually doing you a favor by helping you, helping kind of weed out people who aren't a fit. You don't probably want to take a job where you have to take a significant pay cut. I get that you may be willing to. And listen, if the company can't find somebody with the right skills in their, with the right skills and same experience level that they're looking for, they may consider you. But understand that the company is usually going to try to really stick to their the profile that they've posted for, right, in terms of experience. And usually the experience level that's posted has a correlating compensation that goes along with it. The other thing that they're screening for, and this is really important for everybody. So if you're distracted or multitasking, come on back. They're screening for personality and they're screening for communication skills. And this could be something that they are consciously screening for or unconsciously screening for. So I want you to think about this. So certainly for personality, let's talk about that for a moment. Personality, and again, this will be throughout the whole interview process, but I start talking about it here because it applies the minute you start interviewing with a company. So for personality, they're looking to see, are you likable? Are you engaging? Do you seem to be like a positive person? Do you seem like somebody who would get along with others in the company, right? They're trying to assess, will you fit in with our company culture or with our company dynamic? So again, I don't know that people are always intentionally grading people on personality, but I do want you to know that there is an element of that is consciously or unconsciously being viewed and looked at. And with your communication skills, this goes back to something I mentioned a moment ago when I said, you want to answer the questions that you're asked. So if in an interview, a screening interview specifically, you're asked question A, ideally you want to answer with B and not B through Z, right? Sometimes people, even in a screening interview, are trying to kind of cram 10 pounds of potatoes into a 5-pound sack, as they say. They're trying to cram too much information in there, particularly sometimes more experienced professionals or candidates are thinking, if I just tell them all of this stuff, they'll see how valuable, I am as a candidate to them. And the truth is that sometimes that can reflect negatively on your communication skills. So if somebody asks a question, you want to answer that question clearly, thoroughly, but not with too much detail. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but you want to be clear in your communication, because they're thinking, well, hey, in the business world today, everything's about teamwork and collaboration, right? How's this person going to behave in a meeting? So your communication skills in an interview are, again, kind of a reflection of that. And again, they may or may not be, consciously thinking of that, but that might be something that, they're paying attention to as they're interviewing you is, boy, if I ask this person a question, are they listening and are they answering that question? Are they kind of in the zone and able to answer what I'm asking and stay engaged? That's really important. And like I said, it applies to the workplace. So believe it or not, just going through an interview is something that's informing these people about a lot of other things. So your goal when you're in a screening interview, and frankly, when you're in any stage of an interview, if you're doing 7 interviews like Amy, you're doing 10 interviews like me, your goal is very simple. It's to advance to the next step. Now, I know that your ultimate goal, of course, is to get a job offer, but when you're in this process, I invite you to really think about it a little bit differently. So instead of thinking in the very first interview, I've got to get this job and I want to land this job, it's like, hey, I want to get to that next step. So I want you to kind of adjust your goals, because when you break it down, it's just like any kind of good goal setting processes, right? You break your goal down into, bite-sized chunks that are manageable, and getting to the next step doesn't feel as scary or as intimidating, or doesn't maybe get you quite as keyed up as this idea of, oh my gosh, I got to get this job, right? So your goal should always be get to the next step, and you might not know what that next step is. So in the screening interview, I think you can assume that a next step is going to be another interview with somebody who's more directly involved in that hiring process. It could be multiple interviews like I experienced, but I didn't know that when I was going into my process, right? So each interview I had, I brought my best self. I was as prepared as I could be, and I did my best. And that's all I could do. So that's really all you can do too. But advance to the next step is your goal. And that's a really good thing to remember when you're interviewing. So now let's talk a little bit about video or in-person interviews. I've talked to some candidates who have been doing in-person interviews. So I know we're starting to see that open up, not everywhere and not in great numbers quite yet. But in this case, this woman was interviewing for a role where she was going to need to be going into facilities to call on them as an account manager, account executive. So they wanted to see her kind of in person, right? They wanted to talk to her, meet with her. So they did a safe interview in person, but I want you to know that that's something that can be happening at this point. But I do expect that we are going to see video continue to be a big piece of this process and many other business processes as time goes by. So there's something I want you all to be aware of. Not a lot of companies use this, but just in case you happen to be interviewing or applying for a role with a company where they do use this, I want you to know that some companies will actually ask you to record answers to some set interview questions. It's usually not going to be much more than like 5, but sometimes you will be asked to record answers to questions and send that video in. So video is being used more and more, whether it's live, like Zoom, right? Whether we're speaking, live, or whether you're now recording a video. So again, I know I've heard of the companies that I've heard of who've done this are quite large. It's not across the board, but don't be surprised if somebody asks you for this, and that would mean that you will need to be comfortable recording yourself and having access to a computer where you can record yourself, or a phone where you can record yourself and set that up. So luckily it's not super common yet. And I don't think it's a great practice because a lot of people aren't comfortable setting up and recording themselves at home. I mean, I do this professionally day in and day out. And I know there's people who do it professionally as well, use Zoom frequently professionally, and they're not comfortable with it. So the added pressure of recording yourself, I know really kind of puts a lot of people on edge, but just wanted you to know that that is something that could be asked of you. Now, what's more common is kind of the format we're doing now, right? A live video interview. This is an interview I recorded with Paula. Paula is a client who worked with me, and we did some recordings of interview questions and answers, and recordings of me providing feedback to her. So this is what that would look like, right? We were using actually a different format than Zoom, so we were actually side by side in this video format. But with Zoom, you look a little bit different. You can be kind of smushed up and smush your screen, and then you can actually get the interviewer's camera right on top. So that's something I do want to address right now. I'm going to mention to you one of the tricks when you're interviewing on live video. If you're a user of Zoom, which a lot of people are, and I'm not sure how it works in Teams. It's been, it's been several months since I've used Teams. But I know with Zoom, you can actually, shrink your screen, right? So instead of having it be full screen, you can shrink your screen, choose the gallery view, and then you can bring that screen in, right? Narrow it. When you narrow it to a certain point, those video images will suddenly go top to bottom instead of going side by side. So one of the things when you're interviewing is that you want to be looking at the camera, right? Like I'm doing right now. I'm looking at a green dot at the top of my laptop in order to look directly at you guys. And you want to do that too. When you do this with Zoom, this allows your interviewer's image to be a lot closer to the top of your computer screen, which is where your camera is located if you're using a laptop or even if you're using a desktop, right? In many cases, that's where you're going to have it set up. So that's a little tip from me to you about making sure that you're looking in the right area and it looks like you're making eye contact, right? These are some of the things that are challenging with video interviewing and with this technology that has now become very commonplace in the workplace, whether it's for interviews or whether it's for meetings or any number of things. So let's talk about some video interview practice tips because this is important. So as I was talking about before, I'm looking at the camera right now. I actually have a stand that I put my laptop on. I'm going to show you a picture of it in a moment, but you want to position your camera at about eye level. So I am literally looking right at that camera. I'm really situated in you can see in the frame, right? When you look at this video in the upper right, I'm situated right where I want to be situated. I'm right in the middle. I've got my background framed the way I want to frame it. I'm the right distance away. It looks good, right? If you're using a laptop, then you might need to prop your laptop up. I know a lot of people will have their laptop down on a table and be looking down. It's just not as flattering, frankly, of the view. And you really want to feel your best and look your best when you're in an interview situation. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So this is actually the computer stand that I popped my laptop on. I love this thing. I got it like discounted through Amazon Warehouse, which I didn't even know existed. That's great. It's very lightweight. It's actually, I can disassemble this and take it with me if I want. But here's the great thing. You don't have to buy anything from Amazon. Before I bought this, I finally bought it because I was doing so much work on my laptop and so many videos using that laptop that I felt I needed this instead of this setup, which was a cardboard box from Amazon. So guess what? I was making it work during COVID, the early days, and then I finally decided, well, this doesn't make sense anymore. This is clearly going to be something I'm going to be doing all the time. So you can see I measured the box for you. The box is about 5.5 inches high. That's about where you'd want to be for putting your what you want to put your laptop on. Okay, so you can kind of understand, like, it's one of those smaller boxes from Amazon, but anything that measures around there will help you. Sometimes it's a stack of books. Use whatever you've got, but you can make this look better, and that is important. I know it seems silly, and I know it seems like it is extra work. It doesn't seem like extra work. It is extra work, but it'll pay off because you're going to look good on camera. And that's important when you're interviewing. So now let's talk about tip number 2. Again, practicing talking into the camera. I talked earlier about practicing interview questions out loud, right? Well, you also want to practice talking into the camera, and you can even record yourself on Zoom. If you have a Zoom, your own kind of Zoom setup, I'm pretty sure you can do that for free. You can also do this on Facebook. Somebody taught me this trick and it's great. So if you're on Facebook, I used this myself. You can create a group that's just a group that includes you. You can create this group and just call it your interview practice, group. So I would call mine Lene Interview Practice. Okay. Then you go into that group in Facebook and you learn how to go live. And there's a little button you'll hit like where it says, what's on your mind, and you'll hit a button and you'll find the go live button. You can go live in the group, which is just you. Nobody else is seeing it. And you've set your group to private and you're the only member. So I promise nobody else will see this. And you can record yourself answering questions or looking at the video camera and getting a sense of how you look and how you want to position yourself. So here's something I literally did that got me much more comfortable being on camera and knowing that I was looking in the right place and that I was showing myself visually the way I wanted to. Some cameras, some programs you use, whether it's Facebook or Zoom or different ones, look a little different. Sometimes they flip the image, sometimes they don't. So what I would do is sometimes I would say, I would narrate where I was looking. So what that would sound like, and I know this sounds kind of crazy, but I'll tell you exactly what I would do. I would say, right now I'm looking at the green dot on my computer. Right now I'm looking at the very top of my window that I have open. Right now I'm looking slightly below that. And when I narrated that, I could see when I watched the replay how I looked and where I wanted to look in order to look just right. So this is a skill you have to learn. So it is one that you want to practice, and that's an easy, free way to practice. And you can record yourself on Facebook, and you can replay that within your group and get a sense of that. So that really helped me a lot, and I love that tip. So you can do it on Zoom as well with your account, but I want you to consider practicing because, again, a lot of people, I should say, are intimidated by this idea. And if you are intimidated, You will do so much better if you practice. That is the theme of tonight. Practice makes perfect. Well, it doesn't make perfect, right? I had a snafu here at the beginning of today's session, right? Even though Jordan and I were prepared and got on early, mistakes will happen. Don't worry about it. But I think the more you practice, the more you can get comfortable with managing through, the nerves, managing through some of the flubs that might happen. So anyway, there's a little tip for videos. And also something I do want to recommend is trying to set up in a location that looks nice, that has good natural lighting, natural light, shining on your face, like you're facing a window or you have a light pointed at you. Now, it's evening now here, right? By you too, I know, right? I'm up in Chicagoland. So the room I'm in right now, I have 2 windows that are in front of me. So during the daytime, I get some really nice light in here if the sun is shining. But I also have a large ring light pointed at me right now because it's evening. And if I didn't have that ring light, I wouldn't look right? I wouldn't be well lit. So I also have a light here to my right that's on. And actually, I usually have my light above me on, and I forgot to turn it on. So, but it still looks okay because I've got this bright ring light. So you don't have to purchase a full-size ring light. I did that because this is what I do professionally every day. However, you can purchase a light if you feel like, let's say you're in a room where you don't get good natural light, or where you can't set your desk or your setup, whether it's temporary or permanent, right? Your office setup, if you can't get in front of a window where you are going to have good natural light shining on your face, make sure that when you're doing an interview, you're in an environment that looks nice. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? But it looks neat and clean and attractive, and you are easy to see, right? People want to see your face. So make sure that you're thinking about that. This is the office setup that I've got. It ends up working pretty well for me, but you by no means do you have to have kind of this big old pro office setup. You just need to have a nice setup that looks nice as a background. Simple is best. So when I talked about lighting, here's a couple of things I wanted to mention to you. I talked about the fact that I've got a big old ring light in front of me. It's like 6 feet high. But I've purchased this one on the left, this little guy that is like $20 on Amazon, and it is a travel light. And I used this actually when I traveled and had to do, a CBS interview when I was out of town. And I needed a light because I didn't know what it was going to be like where I was staying, right? Whether you're in a hotel or a house, whatever you're renting, I didn't know what it would be like. And this thing worked beautifully. So you can get these very inexpensively. The one on the right is called the Lume Cube. It's L-U-M-E. As you can see on the laptop photo there, it can clip to your laptop, or it actually suctions to your laptop. And you can adjust the brightness. So a lot of people really like that. It's very easy to use. It's more expensive though. I think it's around $80 if I'm not mistaken. So again, you don't need to invest in these things. You can just get a lamp in front of you or a few lamps in front of you. Again, you might have to kind of jockey around and move some things around your house to ensure that you've got a setup where you're going to look good on camera when you're interviewing, but it certainly is worth your time. So you don't have to purchase these things, but I just wanted you to know that they're available to you if you want those tools. So let's talk about interview best practices. So one of the things that you want to do, whether you're going to an in-person interview or a video interview, is arriving on time or early. Now for these video interviews, it's kind of funny. You don't want to arrive too early. The person you're interviewing with might be doing interviews back to back on their Zoom account. So, but you can get there early and just sit and wait, right? Some people will hop on meetings, right, 10 minutes early and just do some other things while they're waiting. But I would recommend just getting on only a couple minutes early for a Zoom call. Obviously, if you're going to an in-person interview, I recommend getting there earlier because you've got to navigate getting to where you're going and making sure that you know where you're going or get to the right spot on time. I also think it's so important, and I coach people on this all the time. I know this doesn't sound like a super specific interview technique, but demonstrate enthusiasm around the company, around the opportunity. So very important because everybody doesn't do it. So one of the secrets to interviewing well is really being enthusiastic. It doesn't mean that you have to be over the top, but you have to have some genuine interest. Do some of your homework. Like I said, research the company and really be enthusiastic, positive when you're speaking with the interviewer. I talked earlier about keeping your answers brief and to the point, really kind of trying to talk somewhat in sound bites. You want your ideas to be very clear and easy to follow for the person who's listening, because that is, like I said, it's hard for the person who's on the other side to stitch a lot of things together if you're giving them a lot of information. So the simpler you can keep your answers and the more focused, the better. Like I said a moment ago, in addition to the enthusiasm, you want to convey positivity. You want to be engaged. You really want to appear to be likable. I mean, at the end of the day, people are interviewing you, and these are some of the things that you're going to be, evaluated on. Now, it's not going to be the same for every role. Certainly for the profession that I was in for 29 years in corporate was sales. So certainly in sales, having somebody who was likable was something that was, definitely part of the equation. Now, if you're a finance analyst, you don't necessarily have to have the same kind of personality as a salesperson, but you certainly do need to be able to communicate well and clearly and demonstrate mastery of what you do day to day. The other thing I want to suggest is that when you go into an interview, you want to have 2 or 3 questions prepared for the end of the interview. You're often given the opportunity at the end of the interview to ask questions. And I want you to think about ones that you can ask that can really help you advance your candidacy. And this is kind of a great strategy. So, in my mind, you don't want to ask questions about benefits or, like any kind of benefit, right? Health benefits, vacation at the interview stage. Those are questions that you definitely will want to ask or get information on if you get a job offer. But until you have a job offer, benefits is probably not something that you need to ask about. But something you could ask about, or here's another one that maybe you don't want to ask. You don't want to necessarily say, what's a typical day like? That's maybe not as thoughtful as some other questions you could ask that I think are quite interesting. One thing that's really big in corporate America today, and really many companies, is company culture. So you could ask them, tell me a little bit about your company culture. What are some of the areas of focus? Now that's a question you could ask of anybody in the company, the most senior person to the most junior person. And it's a thoughtful question, and it gives them an opportunity to talk a little bit more about the company. You could also ask them, what are some of the key areas of focus for either this department or the business right now? And once they answer that, and then, in addition, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're dealing with right now, or trying to fix, or whatever it is? Those are 2 thoughtful questions that, again, give you more information, more insight into the business, and that really reflect well on you as a candidate, because those are strategic questions. One of my very favorite questions is asking, what do you think are the most important skills for this role? Or what are you looking for in the ideal candidate for this role? What are the skills you're looking for? That is such a great question, because whatever they say, if you have those skills, you can immediately in the moment say, that's so great, because as we talked about earlier, I definitely blah, 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 right? So you have this opportunity to reinforce at the end of the interview your qualifications for the role. So those are some great examples of questions that you can ask. And then at the end of the interview, again, whether it's Zoom, in person, I want you to get in the habit of always asking for the email address of anybody you interview with, whether it's asking for their business card. But again, if we're not in person, that's not so easy to do. But you can ask for their email address so that you can write them a thank you email. So let's talk about interview questions and how to prepare. I was giving you a little bit of advanced information, here. I was talking a little bit about the questions you ask at the end, but let's talk about the types of questions that you can encounter. One is general interview questions, and the other is behavioral interview questions. So general interview questions sound like, how did you hear about this opportunity? Tell me what interests you about this position. And what do you think are the most important skills required for this role? So those are all questions that I categorize as general interview questions. And, again, many people use them, but a lot of companies are using behavioral questions. So let's talk about those for a moment. Behavioral questions have become quite popular with a lot of companies over the last several years. I'm not a fan, but a lot of companies are. Now, some of the questions I ask would technically be categorized as behavioral, but not too many. So behavioral questions typically are asking about a specific incident, and companies believe that your answer about what you did in a specific incident in the past will be an indication of your behavior in the future. So that's why they're called behavioral. Your past behavior is going to be an indication of your future behavior. So this is what those questions sound like. Tell me about a time when you made a mistake and how you handled it. Tell me about a time when you had a conflict with a coworker and how you dealt with it. So a lot of times these tend to be questions that are like challenge questions or conflict related questions. They can also be more positively framed questions. Technically, this question would be behavioral, like tell me about, your top 3 professional accomplishments. Could be considered behavioral, right? Your accomplishments would be considered part of your behavior on the job. So the things you accomplished in your previous experience, your previous professional roles, would be an indication to the company of the types of things that you would be capable of accomplishing if they were to hire you. So these are questions, both different types of questions that you want to be prepared for. Now, I just talked about the fact that at the end of the interview, you want to ask your questions and then you want to do some follow-up and get the email. So you always want to write a thank you email to your interviewer or interviewers. And that's why it's important to always ask for their email. Ideally, you want to do this within 24 hours of your interview. Obviously with COVID, we aren't going into the office anymore right now. And so you don't need to mail a thank you note, but people expect an email thank you pretty quickly. I mean, it could be 24 to 48 hours, but I recommend 24 hours. That is the standard I always held myself to when I was interviewing, and I was very successful at interviewing and securing jobs back in my day. So what do you do in the thank you note? Well, you thank them for the interview, of course. You let them know that the interview has made you even more enthused about this opportunity. You want to reiterate why you would be a great fit. And ideally, you keep this short and sweet, right? As we discussed, or as you mentioned, these skills are so important, and I'm, happy, I can demonstrate, or I hope I, demonstrated that I have these skills based on my prior experience, or have, this skill, and this skill, based on my prior experience, and let them know that you're looking forward to their feedback. You close it by saying, I'm looking forward to hearing about next steps, actually. I'm looking forward to hearing about next steps is really how I like to word it these days. So, that's a nice, quick and easy thing that you can do to just let them know that you're enthused. Now, if you don't hear from them right away, don't panic. Wait 4 to 7 days before following up again, right? And I would also ask people at the end, what can I expect in terms of next steps in this process? That's another question I do recommend you ask at the end of an interview. And they'll typically tell you. I would always tell people exactly what to expect. I would tell them the timeline I expected to the best of my ability. And I would also tell them, if you don't hear from me, within a week or within 2 weeks, I want you to follow up with me. So sometimes I would put that on the candidate and say, okay, if you don't hear from me, I want you to get back in touch, because you're definitely a candidate I'm interested in. So you wait 4 to 7 days. Don't be discouraged, like I said, by a lack of feedback. So many employers seem to take longer than they would even like with the process. Sometimes it was out of my control how long things took internally, like if I was creating a job offer for somebody. So stay the course. And honestly, I want you to feel comfortable continuing to reach out weekly until you get a response. You definitely deserve to get a response if you've been engaged in an interview process. So you're not, I don't think, being a pest. You just have to write a very respectful email consistently. Hey, just following up again. Maybe my email got buried in your inbox. I'd love to hear, where things stand with the XYZ role. Thanks so much. Looking forward to your reply. Super simple. So you're not going to, write a long note when you're trying to get that follow-up, but try to get an answer from people. I think that you deserve it. So that's everything I wanted to cover today. I'm watching the clock and I want to answer any questions we might have. But real quickly, I wanted to just mention to you that if you want to join my email list, I send an email video out every week. I'm sending one out tomorrow. They go out every Wednesday. So you can sign up for that on the contact page of my website. You can also find a link on the contact page of my website to my Facebook group, which is called Job Search Strategies and Career. Actually, it's just called Job Search Strategies for Professionals. These days, we shortened that title. And you're certainly welcome to connect with me or follow me on LinkedIn. So with that, I want to make sure that we take a few minutes to see if there's any questions based on the information. I mean, I have tons of information. I wish I could go through more with you, but in 1 hour, that's about as much as I could get in. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and see if there are any questions. I'll take a look at the chat, or Jordan maybe can walk us through that as well. So I'm taking a peek right now.
Yes, you can share your questions through the chat. I think we have one already, or you can raise your hand and I can unmute you if you prefer to speak. And it looks like, I don't know, Lene, if you can see the chat question here. I'll just go ahead and read it for everyone. This week, I am interviewing with a company I previously worked for a few years ago. They left on very good terms, excellent terms, they specify. What do you think they will ask as an opening question? Typically, it is, tell me about yourself. However, they still remember me, and they're excited that they applied and they want to practice a strong opening.
Oh, well, Sarah, that's exciting. Good for you. Yeah. Well, the great news is that you know that they're excited. I mean, that's wonderful. So I want you to walk in there feeling confident about this opportunity. So, I think that, I have no idea what they'll ask for an opening question. I wish I could read their mind and tell you, but, it might end up being that they are telling you more information to start, right? Why they're bringing you back in to talk to you. I don't know if it's for the same role that you did before, if it's for a different role. So if it's for something different, they may be kind of saying, look, we're whatever, we're restaffing up and, or we've created this role and we think you'd be a perfect fit. Like, I don't know. So I wouldn't know what they might open with, but I think that for you, I don't even know if you quote unquote have to practice that strong opening. It sounds to me like after leaving on excellent terms, you were in a position where they were excited to bring you back at a future date, which isn't always the case with people who leave companies, whether it's on their terms or whether they're asked to leave by the company. So good for you. I would just go in there feeling really positive about the fact that that's the circumstance you find yourself in, because circumstances like that are often very productive in terms of job opportunities. So good luck. Okay, let's see. When they say, tell me about yourself, Barbara, that's great. I love you asked that, because a lot of people get very tripped up. They're not looking for your life history. And I'm being, I don't mean any insult, but I think some people really don't know, what am I supposed to say? Well, it's not a super long answer, believe it or not. Remember, you're in a job interview, so your answers are all going to be kind of oriented to this idea of the job. So if I were to be asked that question, I would, and let's say I'm interviewing for another media sales director job, I'm going to keep it real simple. I'm interviewing for the type of job that I had previously professionally. I would say, I have been I've worked in media sales professionally for over 29 years in sales and sales management, and most recently as a sales director at Comcast. I love media sales. I love what I do. I just absolutely love working with advertisers, and I'm passionate about it. And I'm really excited about, getting back into the media industry after having been away for a few years. So I'm really excited to speak with you about this role today, because it looks like a perfect fit for my skills and experience. So it's pretty tight what I just said. Now you could certainly add a little bit more in there. You could say, I've said, I've worked in the media industry for 29 years. I worked at companies including the Chicago Tribune, as well as online properties like apartments.com and livingsocial.com. And most recently, I was working in cable advertising sales at Comcast as their local director of sales, and then go into the stuff that I just said. So it still is going to be career oriented and job oriented, really, your answer. And you're going to keep it pretty tight, and then you're going to bring it back around to how that, whatever you're telling them about yourself relates to the job at hand. Okay, let's see. Great. Okay, good. Oh, I'm glad that's helpful. Excellent. Okay, good. All right. Any other questions? I know Jordan's got some stuff she's going to talk about here at the end too, but if there's anything else, I'm happy to answer. But thank you. Those were some really good questions. I love that one. Any quick tips on what to wear for a Zoom interview? Listen, I'm a big proponent of, I dress like the way I would dress for, if I were walking into the place, except for the fact that I might have yoga pants on, right? I'm comfortable, but I do dress professionally, and I'm not necessarily, in anything uncomfortable, but, I wear what I would normally wear to an office. So that, I look appropriate and professional. So it could be something, if you're a woman, I think it was a woman who just asked that, a nice sweater like I've got on and a blouse, but I'm dressed like I would, I would, something I feel good in and look good in order to make the best impression, in order to feel good myself going into the interview. So great question. All right. Thank you guys so much for all the questions and the interaction. I appreciate it. I'll let Jordan take over from here.
Thank you. Looks like we might have one more, Lene, if you're willing to, and any advice for an anxious interviewer?
Well, what did I say? Is it Johanna? Practice. It's practicing. So practicing out loud. If you're anxious, everybody's anxious. Just so you know, listen, I did very well in interviewing, and every time I went into an interview, of course, you're going to be nervous. So everybody's going to have that kind of nervous excitement. Some people aren't really excited. It doesn't feel like excitement, right? But those nerves are going to be there for everybody. Now, for me, because I had been in sales for many years, I was able to kind of ease into it fairly quickly, right? I was used to those circumstances where I was engaging with somebody maybe I didn't know and had to work through it. If that's not the case for you, I do think doing some of this practice, like I said, recording yourself, getting comfortable, trying to get comfortable with how you look, how you sound, so that you're not self-conscious if that's something that plagues you. And I know a lot of, pressure, people put a lot of pressure on themselves because they feel like a lot is riding on the interview, right? When you're interviewing, you want to get a job offer. So trying, like I said, to also just think about getting to the next step and trying to relieve as much pressure on yourself as you can, as well as preparing. And then it's like, I'll close by saying this. It's like when you're in school, when you're in high school or college, and you've got to take a test. And you can study as much as you want for that test, but at test time, you've got to just go take the test. So at that point, it's kind of that same thing that you did when taking tests. Try to shake it off and go, okay, I've prepared as much as I can. Now I'm going to go in and take the test and do the best I can on the test, and we'll see what happens. So that's my best advice.
Thank you, Lene. And I will add, we talked about this last week we had a tech tips for your job search. Some of these platforms like Zoom and Skype, they offer basic or versions that are no charge. So practice whenever you can with a friend. We're here for you here at the library. So you can get kind of past some of those technical pieces, and you can work on some of the practice points in terms of your professional life. Well, once again, Lene, that was great. I don't see any further questions here. Here is my contact information if you wanted to reach out. We are also providing practice interviews here at the library. We could also review your resume, your cover letter. We've been hosting a lot of practice interviews, so that's been really fun. Our next career webinar will be on Tuesday, April 13th at 7 p.m. And that will be the Art of Negotiation presented by Mike Furman, who's actually the Associate Director of Career and Professional Development at the Graduate College here at the U of I. And he'll just discuss some strategies that can enhance those negotiation skills and just improve your overall outcomes when you're hopefully offered that job. And then we hope you'll consider attending more webinars. Here are the remaining ones for April, but we have a lot more webinars related to our business series, our technology series, our writers workshops, crafty adults. So you could just visit champaign.org/events for more information. And yes, if you have any further questions, if you didn't quite catch my email, you could also email librarian@champaign.org or follow us on social media. Lene's, we're getting some thank yous for you here. Let's see here. And you can chat with us. And once again, just feel free to reach out for any questions or concerns that you may have. There I am. I wanted to turn my video on. All right. I don't see any further questions. Once again, Lene, thank you. That was great. I was taking some notes as well here.
Nice. Well, good. Thank you all for attending and for your engagement. I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, I wish everyone a good night and take care and bye-bye.